Hello, parents and professionals. I'm going to start by apologising for the quality of the sound. Hopefully, I've managed to clean it up quite well, but I've got the windows open because it is warm, and that means there is traffic noises, as demonstrated. Today, we are going to be talking about how it is that we need to be a little bit careful with our labelling. And I'm not talking about avoiding labeling problems that exist. I'm talking about how, when a label has been applied, it's very easy to start fulfilling that unconsciously. And I'm talking about both you as a parent or professional and a child who has been given a label. So I'm going to give you an example of when this has happened, and we're going to have a look at what we need to do about it. If it sounds like this would be helpful stuff for you to know about, then just keep on watching. Okay, before we jump into it, I'm just going to give you a reminder right now that you need to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and click the notifications bell so you get notified the next time I upload another one, because I keep forgetting to do the reminders. This is me doing the reminder. I'm going to tell you a story. This story is from about maybe 15 years ago, something like that. This is an old one. It's from the archive of my brain. Once upon a time, about 15 years ago, I noticed that my hearing was not so good on one side. I don't even remember which side it was now, but let's say it was my right side. On my right side, I noticed that I was not hearing as well as I should do. And I went to visit my doctor, and my doctor sent me for a hearing test. When I got to the hospital and we did the hearing test, one side was absolutely fine, and the other side was not giving me low-level noises as it should do. I wasn't hearing them very well. However, my hearing of high-pitched noises on that side was superhuman, as in, you should not be able to hear sounds that are pitched that high, and yet I could. So it was a bit unusual. And I don't know what the word is for a person that takes a hearing test. They must have a name, right? I have no idea. The hearing test person said that they wanted to send me for a brain scan. And very quickly, I started to panic and wondered why I needed a brain scan. And so I inquired, and he said, well, sometimes these kind of phenomena can happen because there is something that is pushing on the ear canal that is causing sound to distort. And so I said, when we say something pushing on the ear canal, what kind of thing are you talking about? And he said, this could be a brain tumor. Very quickly, I was worrying, and I had a period of time between hearing that news and having my MRI scan, and then subsequently getting the results to the MRI scan. In that period of time, I was worried, and even though I didn't outwardly express that worry, I didn't sleep as well as I usually would do. And I maybe went off my food a little bit, and I wasn't really panicking. This was just a little bit of worry. But you know what happens when you don't eat well and you are not sleeping as well as you usually would do, is your concentration isn't all that good. And maybe you start to get a few extra headaches. Well, these things were happening for me. I wasn't concentrating very well because I had this little worry in the back of my mind. And I was starting to get a few more headaches because I really wasn't sleeping very well at night. And poor concentration and headaches are also symptoms of a brain tumour. I'm not going to say that I was diagnosing myself as dying at that particular time, but I maybe was a little bit diagnosing myself as dying. I didn't need to go Googling all of the other symptoms that related to having a brain tumour because I was very successfully manifesting them for myself. And not because I was overthinking the problem maybe a tiny little bit, but more so because my reaction of worry just happened to correlate with quite a lot of the other symptoms that one might experience. Now, just to end the story, I went for my MRI, I got the results back, I went back to see the hearing test person whose proper job title name we do not know, and I sat down with him and said, "So what did you find?" And he said, he's holding up my scan pictures, and he said, "Nothing." And I said, "Some brain in there though, right?" And he said, "Oh yes, plenty of brain," which was a relief. But unsurprisingly, there was absolutely no brain tumour whatsoever. I slept like a baby that night and ate a full dinner. Not necessarily in that order either. So here's the moral of the story. I know this stuff. I'm telling you, make sure that if we've got a label in the mix there somewhere, we don't all just start looking out for the signs and symptoms of that label such that we end up seeing the signs and symptoms of that label and making the label more potent and sticky than it ever was to begin with. I know this stuff and I still fell for it. So it's not easy to do. Here's what's important. Sometimes young people are going to be given labels about their abilities, about their disabilities. They're going to be given labels about their needs. All of these different things can show up for them in the work that we are doing. And it's super important that we still consider them as a whole, complete, perfect young person, and that those labels are things that assist us in helping them when they need help, but not to help us identify further failings or challenges or difficulties that we'd never seen before. We don't need to go looking for trouble, is what I'm saying here. Sometimes our desire for certainty is so strong that being able to go, there's another symptom of that label, I've just seen something else, helps us to make the point seem more solid and more certain, but it's not actually helpful. It's not necessarily doing that young person any favours, and it's quite possibly fluke. It's just a one-off. The number of times I have taken different tests to see if I have ADHD and scored really rather highly are probably not all that surprising to you, and yet I haven't got it. If I have a bad day, I can take a test for some other thing and score very highly on that. Sometimes even if someone has been given a label, they might show their signs and symptoms more aggressively on some days more than others. Like some days they're going to be a bit less ASD than they are on other days, just because of the circumstances that are going on around them. So on that note, let's talk a little bit about environment, because if we have an environment that is really supportive of doing the absolute opposite of whatever that label is that they have, then we might start to see that label really doesn't look quite so relevant anymore. If you have a really good routine when you have an ASD young person, then they ASD a little bit less. If you have no routine and you spring a ton of surprises on them, well, guess what? They suddenly start living up to their label quite a lot more aggressively than they perhaps would have done before. And the same can be said of any other types of labels. If we create environments that help support that young person through the bits that they find challenging, then we can really start to shrink the potency of the label that they've been given. So if you know a young person who has recently been diagnosed with a something or given a label of some kind, a really useful thing to do is to focus on all of the things that you can fix, all of the workarounds that you can put in place, and everything that you can possibly do to help them function, feel, and behave as a normal, everyday individual, so that that label doesn't become an identity for them, and the symptoms of it don't become something that we are constantly looking for and inadvertently encouraging them to live up towards. Think about how it is that you can make life as simple, straightforward, and easy for them as possible, so that that label really doesn't seem to affect their lives at all. My challenge to you is this: having identified the label for that young person, how can you make it seem as though everybody else who comes to know them in the future would say, I never would have guessed that that was the case. So think about all of the ways in which you can change their circumstances, their schooling, their interactions, their routines, or all of the things that you might need to consider to make their life livable to the fullest without that label getting in the way. I hope that's been really helpful for you today, and if you have anything else that you would like to add or share that would be useful for other people to know about, perhaps where you have had to deal with working around labels with the young people you know and work with, then please feel free to leave that in the comments down below. I'd love to hear about it. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!